And of course, if during the class connection goes down, something bad happens, just spam Q&A and I'll try to look at it, or like raise your hand very aggressively, and then I'll know that something is wrong, but hopefully should be fine. We're in a better setup today. Good internet connection, all that jazz. All right, 7:03. So let's breathe for 30 more seconds and then we will start. Would urge you to go to projects.100xsteps.com/ I'll just open the Next.js track or go to /tracks/Next.js-1, and that should open the track for today. These are the slides for today. This is where we'll follow along. If you feel like we're going slow, feel free to jump ahead. The goal is to, well, try to finish as much of this as we can. I'm unsure, this is a little too much. This is just front end of Next. It could be a lot to cover in 2 hours, so we will see. The things we're not able to cover today, we'll cover tomorrow. And then if you're able to cover everything today, then tomorrow we'll cover the server side aspects of Next.js. All right. 7:04. So I think we can begin. Welcome everyone, especially the new folks from 1 to 100. There we go. Today's class is going to be on Next.js. Next.js is a front-end framework that's has been popping off for a while. Now the market leader for a few reasons. Number one, Vercel owns it. Number two, provides you a few things that React wasn't able to provide for the longest time. The React project was started at Facebook. It had a few inconsistencies. Next.js came into the picture, solved those inconsistencies, moved very fast, created a company around it called Vercel. And now a lot of the React team has moved to Vercel. So, they're sort of leading the charge on front-end frameworks, which is why good thing to know. Another reason it's good to know is a lot of projects we will see, open source projects, are being built in Next. Generally, if you want to build your project, if the industry is building using this, you should build using this. Will this change in the future of Girath? Probably. Every 2 years, front-end frameworks change. But the thing about Vercel is they move really fast. They're very aggressive. And hence, I feel this will be the popular front-end framework for a while. Prerequisites for today's class is you need to understand React, nothing more. If you don't understand React, this class is going to be very difficult. So make sure you understand the basics of React, can create components, and yeah, that's it. Basics of front end, understanding what a website is, HTML, CSS, JavaScript, all that jazz. If you understand that, you're good to go. If you don't understand that yet, maybe drop off. This class will become very difficult very quickly. Let's kick things off by introducing Next.js. What is this framework? Why is it so popular? Next.js was a framework that was introduced because of some minor inconveniences in React. It's not like you cannot create websites in React. You can create the most beautiful websites in React, but React has inconsistencies, some minor inconveniences. To name a few, in a React project, you have to separately maintain the backend and your frontend. Your backend is not part of your frontend code. React is only used to create the frontend, and backend is written usually in Express. However you want to write your backend, doesn't matter. Oh, shit, easy. No, it is happening. Great. So, when you're in a React project, your React project exists separately. Your backend project exists separately. This is written usually in Node.js. You can write it in Golang. You can write it in Rust. But the frontend is written in React, which eventually gets compiled down to HTML, CSS, JS, which is what your project serves. This is a brief distinction between React and your backend code. They always live separately, either in different repositories or even if they're in the same repository. They're present in different folders. They're deployed independently. React does not provide out-of-the-box routing. You have to use React Router DOM. If you've gone through the routing class in React, you might remember that you had to import a library called React Router DOM and then actually do routing in React. This is not a very big inconvenience. It's a very simple library to bring into your code base. But Next.js provides you this out of the box. You don't need any external library to do routing. What is routing? Having various pages on your website. For example, this website has a /tracks/Next.js/Next1 page. Front-end applications have multiple pages. React does not provide this thing routing out of the box. Next.js does. React is not SEO optimized. This is one of the biggest reasons Next.js came. One of the biggest problem with React was, it's gotten better over time, but when it was introduced was, whoever would build a React website, their website wouldn't get SEO picked up by SEO. Google would not recognize their website. Google wasn't able to rank their website very well. We'll see why that happens. With time, the crawlers of Google have become much better, so it's not as big a problem today. But initially, if you created a React website, Google would not Google would not know you, Google would not rank you on their page because of how React works. And lastly, there's something called the waterfalling problem, which is also something we'll discuss very soon. So these are the 4 reasons. There are many more of why you should use Next.js. Let's discuss point 3 and point 4 in a little more detail. All right. Let's move to the second slide. SEO optimization. Let's understand what this is. There's a lot of text here. Ignore that for a bit. Have you ever figured or thought of how Google works? Like, how does Google rank pages? What happens when you actually go to Google and search something? How does it find the top 10 results of that thing? And the answer is Google has crawlers all around the world that are constantly running. They are constantly crawling the web. If this is the world map, they have a bunch of machines everywhere that are hitting websites and more websites and more websites and trying to figure out what they do. So that is how a crawler of Google works. They are constantly hitting websites and trying to understand what is this website doing, and then ranking them based on relevance. The problem with a React application is, okay, let's say this is your CDN. If you've gone to the CDN class, the place where your React website is being served from, and this is the crawler of Google. The crawler will go to the website. Crawler will hit, let's say, https://app.100xdevs.com. It will figure out there is a website that exists like this. It will try to visit that website, and it will get back something from the CDN or wherever this website is served. Whatever it gets back, which is what? HTML files, CSS files, and JS files. It needs to figure out based on this HTML, okay, what exactly does this website do? So if the HTML it is getting back, if it has things like course, because this is my own website that has the course over there, 100x devs, full stack. If the HTML has things like these in there, then the crawler will be able to figure out, okay, this is a course selling website called 100x devs. So whenever someone searches 100x devs on Google, it will understand that this is a course selling website, 100x devs ko upar rank karo, let me point the person to this specific link. But what if the initial HTML doesn't contain any of this? What if the initial HTML has no reference to 100x devs, no reference to course, no reference to full stack? Then it will not be able to figure out very well that this is a course selling application. Of course, the JavaScript can eventually run and put things on the DOM, but crawlers aren't really browsers. When you're crawling the web, you aren't really rendering the thing. You aren't really running the JavaScript. Today, crawlers have become much smarter and they do run the JavaScript. But initially, or even today, they're not really, waiting for the whole website to render and, then actually trying to figure out what the website is. They just hit the website, get back the HTML and try to figure out, oh, okay, this is a course selling application. And React doesn't give you all the content in the initial HTML file. Let's see that very soon. But how do crawlers work? If there are a bunch of crawlers all around the world, and whenever they hit your React server, they get back some content, they try to figure out what this website is. And when you visit a React application, for example, here is a React application that we built last week, a blogging application. If you look at its sign up page, it clearly has a lot of text. It is SEO optimized. It has some text that says the customer support received yada yada. Ideally, when a crawler hits this website, it should figure out that this is some customer related website. But if I click on inspect and refresh this page and look at the HTML that comes back, the very first HTML that comes back has no reference to this code. This code does not exist anywhere. Eventually, this code gets put in this root content, which is how React works. If you might remember, the way we wrote React projects was, we had a top level HTML file like this, and then we wrote code in a bunch of JSX files. All that code is in this second file, index.js, but the HTML file has nothing. It only has the title. The title here has no reference to a blogging website. It's a random title. Even if it was a good title, a lot of text on the website is not present in the initial HTML. So the way React is written, unfortunately, you don't get back all the contents immediately. You of course eventually get back the JavaScript which updates the DOM, and then you see all of this content on the screen. So eventually it becomes SEO optimized, but the initial render doesn't give you, the initial HTML doesn't give you a lot of this content, which is why React isn't SEO optimized. And that's one of the problems that Next.js tried to fix, or what not tried to fix, does fix. What was the second problem that Next.js, React has and Next.js solves? This is called the waterfalling problem. This also you will hear very popularly even outside React. Okay, what is waterfalling and when does it happen in a front-end project? Let's say you're building a blogging website in React. What steps do you think the request cycle takes? Let's say you're building a website like this, which is again something we built last week, a Medium website. When you visit this page, what all requests do you think go out? If I go to here /blogs, and the backend is down right now, or it is up. So what all requests do you think go out when I go to this page /blogs? Number one, a request goes out that says, please give me the HTML file here. And it gets back the HTML. That's the first request that goes out. If I right click here, sorry about that, click on inspect and open the network tab, refresh, the first request goes to /blogs, which gets me the HTML. And then in the HTML, since there is a reference to a JavaScript file, the second request goes out to get the JavaScript files. After the JavaScript file comes, we send a backend API call to the backend route, which in this case is week3 offline.key.technologies.worker.app/API/v1/blog. It gives us the actual blogs, and then we put them on the screen. Can you see so many steps happening one after the other? There are first this happens, then this happens, and then this happens. They don't happen parallelly. They happen one after the other. They waterfall because this depends on this. This JavaScript depends on this blogs HTML page. If I had built this website right now I don't have a bunch of routes on this website. Simply just hits the blogs and gets back. But in the real world, you should also check when the user comes to this website. You should check if they are logged in. And if they are not logged in, you should send them back to the sign up page. This is something we haven't added, but you should ideally send the user back to the sign up page if they're not logged in. So the real request cycle looks like this. First get index.html. Then since index.html has a reference to script, get script.js. Then the script actually runs, this JavaScript script actually runs. Then you send a request to the /me endpoint just to check is the user logged in. Get back their username. Maybe put their username here in the top right of the screen. And then if they're not logged in, send them to the sign up page. If they are logged in, is when you send a request to get the blogs. 4 things happening one after the other. This is what's called waterfalling. Okay, bhai, you built a framework like React, which is very cool, but it's so slow. It doesn't feel like it's slow. It feels like things are happening very snappily. But if you look at it realistically, first this takes 100 milliseconds, 100 milliseconds, 20 milliseconds, 30 milliseconds, one after the other. Wouldn't it be nice if in a single request, you got back everything? You sent a request and in the HTML itself, you got back all the blogs. Right now, what do you get in the HTML? Let's see it one more time if I refresh this. I see a bunch of HTML. I don't see any of my blogs here. These come eventually through the JavaScript. The initial HTML is completely empty, which is why this is not SEO optimized. This also has the waterfalling problem of one request after another after another. What if you could do something like this? Okay, you send the request and you get back the index.html that has all the blogs. You do a bunch of things afterwards as well, but the initial HTML that you get back has all the blogs. This is great because now if this was a crawler, it can get back all the blogs. If this was a user, in a single request they get everything. They don't have to waterfall one after the other. This is what Next.js provides you. These are just 2 important things that I've covered that Next.js provides. It provides you a bunch of other, low-hanging fruits. But the biggest, not the biggest, but like a bunch of big things that it provides is, it makes your project SEO optimized. Google can now discover you and figure out you're a blogging website. And it takes away the waterfalling problem. So, you don't send 4 sequential requests. You send a single request, get back the response. Done with the first 3 slides. Quick recap. Next.js is a great project. Why? For a few reasons. Do we care? Not really. When you're a developer, the only one you really care about is SEO optimized. If you want your website to be SEO optimized, use Next. If not, feel free to use React because Next is expensive while hosting. But for example, this website, Daily Code is on Next.js. Why? Because I want people to, let's say, discover this on google.com. I eventually want this website to be indexed on Google, which is why this is in Next. If that was not the case, I would probably write it in React. All right. Now let's go through some official offerings of Next.js. I've introduced Next.js as, a competitor that took away all the problems from React, but they also have some official, they did not come as a React competitor. Well, they did, but they have a bunch of, their official offerings. This is what we provide. Let's go over them really quickly. Next.js provides you the following upsides over React. Number one, something called server-side rendering. This whole thing that I showed in the last slide, right? The thing that happens in the end. Okay, you send a request to index.html and you get back all the blogs. The fact that you're able to get back all the blogs means your server was able to render some JSX. Whatever components you wrote, they got rendered on the server and put in the HTML and returned back to you. This is what server-side rendering means, but we'll see this more in the slides when we reach like slide 14 or something. API routes. Another big benefit of Next.js is it's not just a front-end framework. It is a full stack framework. If you use Next, you don't need a separate Express application. All the code you can store directly in a single project. Since React makes you maintain two separate projects, Next.js simply says, bro, single code base. In this single Next.js code base, you can have both your front-end code and you can have a bunch of back-end routes. I will handle everything. So it's not a front-end framework per se anymore. It's a full stack framework. File-based routing. Another downside I told of React was that you have to use React Router DOM. Next.js offers something called file-based routing. We'll see what this is soon. Bundle size optimization, static site generation. Bundle site optimization basically means they have sort of owned how to make your bundle really small. Bundle means your HTML, CSS and JavaScript code. So, very compressed code reaches the end user. You can do the same thing in React, but you have to put in a lot of that work. Or in our case, we use Vite very heavily, right? VITE. Vite does a lot of that work. Next.js does that out of the box. Something called static site generation that we'll eventually get to. Feel free to take it as a buzzword. SSG and SSR. Server-side rendering, static site generation are two, popular concepts that Next.js provides you. We'll see what this is very soon. This I've a little bit explained. We'll explain it later in the slides as well. Maintained by the Vercel team. Very ambitious team, have a lot of incentive, VC funded, independently does this. Versus React is just a side project for Facebook, which is why, this might have a lot of updates in the future that eases front-end framework. So good bet to take. Downsides. Cannot be distributed via a CDN. If you've gone through the, 0 to 1 folks who've gone through the front-end deployments in AWS section, deploying a React project is very easy. Next.js project is very hard because it uses something called server-side rendering, because it also has your backend code. As I said, it's a full stack framework. So it's not as easy as, putting it on a CDN. So deployment is hard. Deployment is also very expensive. So these are downsides to keep in mind. If you, just want a quick project for your client or yourself, probably don't use Next. It will be hard to deploy, and number two, very expensive at scale. Very opinionated. Very opinionated basically means, they expect you to do things a certain way, and it's very hard for you to move back to React if you use Next. You can move sort of easily from React to Next. Once you move to Next, you will do a few things in your code base that will make it very hard to move back to React. So they've built it in a way, if one time you move to Next, you're probably sticking to Next. You can never go back to another front-end framework. All right. Let's kick things off. Let's write some code. Let's bootstrap a simple Next.js application. By bootstrap, I mean bring the code of a simple Next.js application locally. And then let's try to figure out what they're giving, what are the routes, what are the files, how does Next let you create a front-end website. So the first thing I'm going to do, and would urge you to do as well, npx create next app @latest. This will create a very simple Next.js application for you. It will ask you for a few things. I'm keeping them on screen so you can select the same options. If you want, you can select other options as well. But there are a few things that will change if you select other options. For example, if you don't use Tailwind, then you'll have to do styling your own way. If you don't use this thing called the app router, which as you can see is recommended, then again, you won't be able to follow in the class basically. So try to follow these steps. I'm going to do the same. And then let's create a fresh React Next.js project locally. After you're done doing this, open it in Visual Studio Code as well. Let's take like a 30-second breather and do this, and then we'll proceed. Ten more seconds. Right. Hope that wasn't too difficult. Just running a command and getting the project locally and opening it in Visual Studio Code or whatever your ID is. So you should have something like this if you've opened it the right place. Let's look at the folders a bit. Let's try to explore what all they give. A few things here are familiar. A few things here are new. Let's try to understand all the files and folders that come here. The first file, as always, is package. Let me just make sure everyone's on the up and up. Shall I proceed? Are we good to go, guys? Let me relaunch the poll here. Oh. 70%. Let me wait. I'm assuming it's just that you're not able to run the project locally. Is there something else? How state management will work? We'll get there. Very similar to React. Please share a snapshot of the chat when in doubt session. Ooh, some independent questions. Is there anything specific that you guys are facing issues with setting up the project locally? Wait, okay, I'll just wait. We can wait. Install steps. It's on the slides. We'll wait for 2 more minutes and then we'll proceed, guys. Take a breather. They're on the 5th slide here on projects.100xdev.com. Just go to the website. Go to the Next.js track here, Next.js client side, and then on slide 5 you'll find the command to run, or you can just copy the command as well. Going to wait for another minute and a half and then we'll proceed. Opening chat in case there's any questions specific to installation. Downloading the package still, net is slow. Wow. Alright, we can wait. It's fine. We will anyways just go over theory right now. So it's fine if it takes you another 10 minutes. Discord for 1 to 100 is on harkirat.classes.co.in. Classes will be 2 hours. I think you should have received a Zoom invite. I think so. That's probably why you're here. Does server-side rendering not slow down overall performance? Not really. It requires a lot of compute. That is the problem. You have a lot of servers running, but it doesn't necessarily affect performance. If anything, it probably makes it better because people could be on bad browsers on cheap machines. If you use a React project, a lot of computation happens on their cheap machines. If you use Next.js, a lot of this computation can happen on a very heavy AWS server. So performance isn't really an issue. All right, 1 more minute and then we'll proceed, guys. This is the command for the people who are still trying to figure it out. 40 more seconds. I'm sorry if I'm running like a clock on your head. We'll not use monorepos with Next.js just yet, but like very soon after we do Next. Next uses SEO. Is the main reason for it to be expensive? No. So Next does server-side rendering. Is why it becomes expensive, because it requires you to have a server versus a website like React does not. That's what makes it expensive. It has nothing to do with SEO optimizations. And what is server-side rendering? We'll see very soon when we reach some slide where I show you all the problems of React went away. There I'll probably introduce it in a better fashion as to what SSR is. Alright, cool. Now if you're not able to bring the project locally in VS Code, it's fine for the next 10 minutes. We're just going through the folder structure. But if you were, that's great. Either way, I'll have to proceed now because we're at 7:30. Let's try to look at the folder structure. Let's see all the files that it gave you. The three important ones, not really important ones, the three new files that you might see is tailwind.config.ts. This is actually not new. If you've used Tailwind in the past, this is the same Tailwind configuration files that comes with it. Only it's already bootstrapped. It already has the paths from which it should find your Tailwind classes, or like the places where it should look for Tailwind classes. And it has some extra thing here which we can remove also, because we won't be using their default code. So feel free to remove this. If you want to keep it, you can keep it as well. The important thing is when you bootstrap the project, the config already has Tailwind classes will either be present here or be present here, or be present here. Which basically means if you're writing any components, any front-end code, write it in either the top level pages folder or the top level components folder, which doesn't yet exist. We'll add them, and then or the top level app folder. This also you can remove because we are now using the app router. We are not using the pages router. If you remember, in the initial questions, it asked you something. It said, would you like to use the app router? And we selected yes. And hence all our code is in this app folder. If you selected no over there, then you would have needed this. Feel free to keep it, feel free to remove it. You can basically create a very lean Tailwind file if need be. Something like this. Or if you want to keep the default one, that's fine as well. The other important file, not important file, but good to know file is this next config files, which right now returns nothing. But eventually when we will reach monorepos, we'll see why this becomes important in a few cases like transpiling. But let's wait for when we reach monorepos to understand how, like what you can pass in here and how it changes your project. For now, your Next.js config is completely empty. Does not return everything, which means by default whatever Next.js provides you, you use. Package.json has all of your dependencies: React, React DOM, and Next. Harkirat, why do we have React if we're using Next? Next is a framework written on top of React. Next is not a separate framework like Vue.js, and hence if you're using Next.js, you have to use React as well. A bunch of dev dependencies because we're using TypeScript, we are using Tailwind, we are using ESLint. What is ESLint, Harkirat? We can get to eventually. Just makes it very easy to structure your project and get rid of what are called linting issues. Feel free to ignore for now. This came because we selected yes over here on ESLint. If you wouldn't have selected it, it wouldn't have come. And that's a brief of the important dependencies that come into your code base. The third and the most important place to look at is this app folder. This is where you'll be spending 99% of your time. This is where you'll be writing all of your code. There will be another folder right next to it called components that we will introduce, but most of the time you'll be present in this app folder. This is where you need to understand what the structure of this app folder needs to be. What is this page.tsx that it has? What is this layout.tsx that it has? I'm assuming global.css is a little self-explanatory. This has all of your default CSS. But what is this layout.tsx? What is this page.tsx? Why do they exist in this app folder is something we'll discuss next. To recap, after you bring a empty Next.js project locally, it has a bunch of files. The important ones, the ones that we might tinker with in the future. Package.json as we bring more dependencies. Probably not tailwind.config.js, probably not next.config.js. We won't be touching them for a long time. This is where we'll be spending most of our time. This is where you'll write components, write your structure. So let's focus on this app folder next. A few things you should do if you've cloned the project locally by now is remove everything in page.tsx, and by remove everything, I mean, I'll show what I mean, but don't clear out the file. The app/page.tsx file has a bunch of code. If I open app/page.tsx, it basically exports a component, a home component. When I say clear it, I mean just return an empty div from here and don't, return all the default code that they give you. So have a very basic application running right now. By default, Next gives you like a very fancy page to deal with, but I would just urge you to clear it out completely and return like a simple hello world from this component. Something like this. We'll wait for 10 seconds. What do you have to do? Completely in page.tsx, make this component very simple, so we don't have any complications in our code base initially. Let's have a simple website to begin with. Harkiyat, where is the website? We will see very soon. First, let's bootstrap the code and make it very simple to understand. So what do you have to do? app/page.tsx. Just return a simple div from this component. This is a normal React component we've written many times now. That's step 1. 5 more seconds and then I'll proceed. The other thing you want to do is go to globals.css and remove everything other than these Tailwind imports at the top. So remove everything like the default black color, a bunch of other things it provides you by default. Very similar to the React project, right? If you remember, when we created a React project, we cleared the app.tsx file, we cleared the CSS file. We're doing the same thing here. Eventually, have a very basic global.css file, have a very basic page.tsx file. We'll understand what these do very soon. 15 more seconds. Just relaunch the poll. All right, very good. Let's proceed. Moving on to the next slide. Understanding routing in Next. If you remember, I told you routing in React was not complicated, but required a framework like React Router DOM. This is how we did routing back in React, if you remember. We added a browser router inside which we added routes. And here we said the sign up page, please render the sign up component. The /sign-in route, please render the sign-in component. And if there's a /blog/1 or /blog/2, please render the blog component. This is how we wrote React. In fact, this is actually the code for this website that we created in week 13. So if I open this, as you see, if I go to the /sign-up page, the sign-up component gets rendered. If I go to the /sign-in page, the sign-in component gets rendered. If I go to /blog/1, there is no blog with an ID 1, but if there was one, you should have seen it here. That's how we did routing in React. Not too difficult, but you have to bring in another external dependency, which is also fine. But Next has its own opinion on how to do routing. As I said, Next.js is a highly opinionated framework. React Router DOM is one library to do routing. You can find other libraries. Anyone can create a library. Does not happen in Next. Next has an opinion. You have to follow that opinion. Okay, this is how routing will happen in Next. Let's see how you do routing in Next. Next has something called file-based router. This is again a new concept. You might have never heard of file-based routing. We'll see what that is very soon. But this has suddenly become a very popular way to create routes. Again, what are routes? /blogs/signup, the current page you are in. This thing is called a route. And the way to do routing in Next is using a file-based router. There is a detailed doc over here that introduces file-based routing in Next. If you want to go through it, we'll go. So I've left links like these from time to time, so you can go through them and read through them. These are the official docs. But let's try to understand what this means. What is file-based routing. This means that the way you create your files describes what renders on a route. I repeat, what renders on /signup will be determined on what files you have created. If you remember, we had the top level app folder and I said this, okay, bhai, this is where you will spend most of your time. So you can actually create files here which will translate to routes. I repeat, as you create more and more files and folders here, they will translate to routes over here. That's a high level, but let's understand what that means. Let's first try to run npm run dev locally. So with me in the project, whatever project you created, go to the terminal of that project and run npm run dev. If this fails for you, you might have to run npm install first. But if it doesn't, then run npm run dev. Or if you're using yarn, then run yarn run dev. Or if you're using a different package manager, doesn't matter. Start the Next.js project locally. What does dev mean? It means development, which basically means we are running Next.js locally for development purposes. This isn't very optimized when it comes to the bundle that you get. If I open localhost :3000 now, you will see a website here on your project as well, on your terminal as well. When you run npm run dev, make sure you're in the right folder, make sure you're not in the root folder. If you're new to terminals, then you probably need to figure this out. If you open this, you should hopefully see hi there at the top left. As you can see, I see hi there on the top left of my screen. Where does this hi there come from? Do you remember? We added a hi there in page.tsx. Now you might have added something else. You might have forgotten to clear this file as well, which means you might see a bunch of code here and that rendered here. But if you do clear page.tsx, if you just add hi there, that is what you will see over there. Does that make sense? Hakikat, how did this thing get rendered on /? Where is the routing? I'll show very soon. Try to go to a different route. Try to go to /signup. And it says this page cannot be found. So it's not like, this code or this component is getting rendered for every route. It is not like this code is getting rendered for every route. It is only getting rendered for the / route or, the root route. Which means if you add any different route after this, sign up, blogs, it does not work. Why? Because we haven't yet added file-based routes. That is something we need to introduce. Let's see why does hi there come? Why does this app/page.tsx gets rendered when you go to the / route? Or more specifically, let's do this. Run an experiment with me. If you go to sign up, you see nothing, right? Create a folder in app. I repeat, create a folder in app and call it signup. Call it sign up. Make sure the spellings are right. Go to your root level app folder and create a sign up folder over there. I'm going to wait for 7 seconds. Hopefully this isn't too difficult. What am I saying? In your initial project, just add a sign up folder at the top inside app. And then inside the sign up folder, add another file called page.tsx. What have I done? Created a sign up folder inside which I added page.tsx and copy over the contents of this file, the root page.tsx over here. To quickly recap, what did I do? I told you to create a sign up folder inside which we create a page.tsx file. And I said you could write this code yourself or just copy it over for now. If you want, you can change this name to, sign up or something else. Does not matter because I've written export default function, which means the name does not matter. This function will get exported by default. In fact, I can also remove the name from here. Does not matter. By default, this function will get exported from this file and maybe over here, write sign up. Okay, so in the sign up/page.tsx folder, write sign up. In the global page.tsx, in the root page.tsx, write something like hi there. If you want to change this to root route, you can change that, write whatever you want here. By the end, you should have the original file. You should have a sign up/page.tsx, which also exports a function which returns sign up. Make sure you save everything. And now try visiting the /signup route. I repeat, let me open this on the right. Let me open the code on the left, sorry, the browser on the left. If I now go to /signup, I see sign up over here. What did it say before? Before it was saying, if I go to a random route, it was saying this page could not be found. What does it say now? It says sign up. Does it seem like we were able to do routing? Were we able to do file-based routing? I created a folder inside which I created a file, and React automatically created routes for me. It figured out that the root folder has sign up, which has this page, which means on this sign up route, this page needs to be rendered. Harkiyat, is this why on the / route, this page was rendered? Yes. The / route is the root route. It means nothing at the end of the slash, which means find the file here. If I write anything else over here, asd, Next.js will try to find the folder here, and from that folder, find the page.tsx inside and render that specific component. Do we understand file-based routing? Were we able to do this locally? Take 20 more seconds. Take a breather. Let me recap everything I did in the past 5 minutes. I introduced file-based routing. I said in Next, you don't do things like these. You don't have a React router DOM kind of a library. Next.js gives you highly opinionated file-based router, which means if you want to, let's say, add a sign up page and a sign in page like we did for our blogging website. Our blogging website that we created last week had a sign up page and a sign in page. If you want to create something similar, this is what your final folder structure will need to look like. Your final folder structure needs to have a sign in folder which has a page.tsx, sign up folder which has a page.tsx, and the global page.tsx. And if you go to localhost 3000/signin, this is the component that renders. This is the component that renders. On the root folder, this is the component that renders. Do we understand this? Because if you understand this, then it is a smoother ride from here. Pretty good, 93%. I think that's pretty good. Which means now can you do a simple assignment for me and add the sign in route as well? I already added the sign up route. Can you add the sign in route really quickly? Let me do that locally as well. I'm just going to copy paste the folder and rename this to sign in. That's it. Now we have 2 routes, a sign up route and a sign in route. Believe it or not, this is how routing is done in Next. Harkiyat, that looks very ugly, I know, but this is how code is written. If you go to the codebase of app.100xapps.com also, you will see the source folder has an app directory which has all of your routes. The courses route, the top level / route, and this has all of your code. This is a little complicated, but I'm just telling you this is how code is written. Unfortunately, go to any Next.js repository, it will have an app folder inside which you have all of your, oopsie daisy. Can you guys, I think I'm back. My machine stuck for a second. 1 second, let me just make sure everything is good. The spam Q&A, let me do a poll, guys. Sorry about that. Are we good to go? Am I visible, audible? Everything is cool? Right. So what I was saying was, every big project will have file-based routing like this. So don't feel like, okay, this is very ugly. No, this probably isn't how it's done. This is exactly how it's done. This app folder has all of your routes. All right. Now we have a sign-in route, a sign-up route, and a page.tsx. If you want to quickly make sure everything is on the up and up, run it locally, go to / and you should see the root route or whatever you've put there. Go to sign up. You should see sign up. Go to sign in. You should see sign in. Cool. Very ugly website right now. We will slowly prettify it. But basic routing is set up. We understand how routing happens. Harkiyat, what if I want to add a page here /sign in/sign-in-to, let's say, or what if I wanted this to be at /auth/sign-in, Harkiyat? Then you just create 2 folders, right? You create first an auth folder inside which you create a sign-in folder inside which you add page.tsx. So if you want your application to get deeper and deeper, which is what everyone wants, then you need to just add deeper routes, which isn't too difficult. We'll see this very soon as well. All right. Done with slide number 6. We understand routing. Cool. Next up, we need to understand to prettify the sign in page. So you can prettify it yourself. We don't have a lot of time, which is why I would urge you to just copy this code. This is the code from week 13. It's basically the code for this sort of pretty sign up component, trimmed down a bit. So feel free to replace your sign in folder with this, or if you want to quickly write something, you can, but we don't have a lot of time. So I would urge you to just copy over this component. This component we wrote in yesterday's class or the offline video for this specific thing on the left. So if you want your sign in page to look a little pretty, I would just copy this. It still export default function. It still returns a React component, but it returns a slightly prettier React component that gives you something like this, like a sign in page. All right. By the end, you should see this on /signin if you have copied this correctly. If you want, do this because this will come later as well. So don't skip this step. Just copy this component and paste it in signin/page.tsx. And then your sign in page should become slightly prettier through Tailwind classes. If I save this and now open /signin, you should see something like this. There's not a lot of functionality, doesn't do anything, but a prettier sign in page. Harkiyat, how does this work? How are you able to create? Go to yesterday's class where we understood all of these Tailwind classes and how to, create a sign in page like this. All right. For now, just simple HTML I've returned. If you think this is too much, you can also just, create your own very quick sign in component, put an input box here, put another input box here, and you're good to go. You don't have to necessarily build my page, but I would urge you to, just copy paste and have a prettier page to deal with. All right. 15 more seconds and then we'll proceed. Make sure you see this on the sign in page. Ignore the sign up page, ignore the root page for now. Let's just focus on one page. If you understand this, you'll be able to understand everything else. Oh, paste component in chat. The link of the code. So you should, okay, let me paste this in chat. Go to projects. I've pasted the exact slide in chat, so you can copy it from there. 10 more seconds, then we'll proceed for the people who did not have access to this. But generally keep this handy, projects.analytics.com. All the code is here, so it's easier to copy. 5 more seconds. All right. Server-side rendering. What did I share initially with you? Initially, I said, React is not optimized when it comes to server-side rendering. This is the code that you would get back. At least the initial HTML that you get back is very minimal, has nothing, has no wajood of your website. Doesn't say that this is a blogging website, doesn't say that this is a sign up page, simply says div id equal to root. And then eventually you put things here using React, but not very optimized for server-side rendering. However, if you go to slide 8 here, what does it say? It says, let's try to explore the response from the server on the /signup route or the /signin route. It doesn't matter. Let's go here, click on inspect, click on network. Let me go to the sign-in route. Let me open the initial HTML page. And if I open this initial HTML page and search for password, notice I see password here. I see username here. I see all the text that you see over here, this global sign-in, this username, this password, comes in the initial HTML. It does not come eventually via a JavaScript file. The initial HTML is very well populated. As you can see, it's a very big HTML file and it has password, the string password written here directly. If I had a quote over here about my website, okay, welcome to the blogging website called Medium where we share a lot of blogs, then the bot would understand, okay, this is a blogging website. The bot would hit the specific URL and figure out, okay, this is a blogging website. Let me rank it on Google the right way. So that's the benefit of server-side rendering. This is what server-side rendering means. Okay, the render. What does rendering mean? Putting something on the DOM. Actually rendering something in HTML. Not exactly HTML. Like technically it means putting something on the DOM. But what does server-side rendering means? It means, I created your HTML on the server itself. Your server has username, password, input box. All that HTML you get from the server. The server is generating your HTML file and giving it back to you. You are not generating these DOM elements on the client. And what is the benefit? your crawler, your Google ka crawler will hit this specific sign in page and be able to understand, Kya this says sign in over here. This says username over here. This is probably the sign in page for Medium. And when someone goes to Medium sign up page, it will be able to figure out, I remember this Medium sign up page was right there, and it will be able to take the user here. So do we understand server side rendering? This was the original screenshot that I added for a simple page like this. If you hit a simple page like this, you will notice in the body, it's not an empty body anymore. It has hi there from the sign up page, which is very discoverable for an SEO bot. Now, if Googlebot tries to scrape your page, it will understand that this is a sign up page without running any JavaScript. This is key. The initial HTML itself is returning this. All this JavaScript comes later. You don't need to run this JavaScript. The initial HTML itself has all the details. This is what server-side rendering means. Your page rendered on the server, your page put things in the HTML on the server, and then returned the final file to you. Do you understand this? Are we good to go? %, good, not great. Time for a break anyways. So let me open chat. 6-minute break anyways. What's left? We're on slide 8. Layouts should be straight. Yeah, I think we'll be able to complete this today. But let's take a 6-minute break once. All the mess people, time for your mess. For everyone else, specifically, this only 88% understood. So is there anything specific that I can help answer when it comes to everything we have discussed today? A lot of questions in the chat, so let me take them one by one really quickly. How can we have a dynamic route, example route containing ID? We'll get to that very soon, but we'll not get to that today, but let me share a quick, if you want to, do it. Bracket open, bracket close, dot, course ID. If you add something like this, then all the routes in / sign in / anything will get caught here. In fact, if you want to go through, the code of 100x devs, because if when you go to app.100xdevs.com and you open a course, as you can see, the route says /courses/1, and then if you go to a different one, it will say /courses/3. So you can basically look at this code and figure this out. If you look at the code of 100x devs, you go to app, if you go to course, you can see it says dot course ID. So this is how you catch everything, catch a dynamic route. But we'll discuss this later on as well. Is this SPA? Good question. This is technically an SPA. It's a single page application. You're routing everything here. You're not reloading this. I don't know if this is technically wrong, but for all, if I had to guess, I haven't technically learned for an interview question if this is an SPA, but as you can see, it is a single page, and as you click on buttons, that page over here reloads, and you don't have a hard reload on the website. So I would assume. Let me Google quickly. Is Next.js? There you go. Next.js enables starting static or single page applications. Optionally, yeah, basically yes. How can you handle dynamic? Okay, everyone had this question. So yeah, hopefully that answered the question of dynamic slugs. Is SSR similar to EJS templating? EJS templating is similar to SSR. When you have templates on EJS, you're generating HTML on the server and returning it to the client. So that is very similar to, that's probably a foundation for what server-side rendering means. You're generating a dynamic HTML file on the server and returning it to the client. So you could say that EJS is similar to server-side rendering. How Next.js manages backend and frontend in the same box doesn't need separation of concern gets compromised. It does. This is a never-ending debate. Okay, is Next something reduced for your backend or not? I get it. It doesn't. It does. It's a little ugly for backend and frontend to be the same repo. There are a lot of unoptimal things in the world which 100 people argue over. It's just how it happens. It does break separation of concern a bit, but it still works. It takes 13.18 seconds to load, and it sends a lot of requests to the server compared to React. It shouldn't take 13.18 seconds to load, especially when you're running it locally, but generally it will take longer compared to a React application, because as we've mentioned before, React applications can be scaled via CDNs, and Next.js application cannot be scaled via CDN. There's no concept of caching of files there. There's concept of edge networks, but yeah, the speed that you'll get in a CDN, which is what you use for videos, which need to come really fast, is something you will not get here, unfortunately. How can we? Okay, answered that. Is there a command like Okay. For Next.js, write default boilerplate. Yeah, that's the command that we ran, right? Next. npx create next type at latest. This will give you a very basic boilerplate code to kick things off from. This is the command. It's present in the slides. How can we handle? Okay, answer that. Oh, that 404 page looked styled. Where is that folder present? There is no person. It gives you a default 404 page. You can override it. I forgot how. You probably can, there's some file you can put somewhere 404.tsx, something like that. I don't know. Google it. And you can default to a 404 page. It gives you a default 404 page. You don't have to create that page like specifically. Must the file name always be page.tsx? Won't it cause confusion when writing the code? Must the file name always be page.tsx? Yes, it will cause confusion, but what will you do? Unfortunately, this is how they expect you to write code. That's how you write the code. I know file-based routing is unoptimal, counterintuitive, feels like why are we doing this? We are doing this because that's how the Next.js people feel like routing should happen. Why do we feel like that? Because the project becomes very, opinionated. And that's beneficial for Next because then it's very hard for people to move off Next. So I think that's the reason why they do it. I could be wrong. Is it my internet's problem? So there is no internet. If you're running the project locally, there is no internet. You have the project locally, it's running locally. So it's definitely not an internet problem. That the project is coming slowly. It does happen. Okay, Next.js is, computing a few things on the server, which is why it might feel slower. But it shouldn't take 14 seconds for whoever it took 14 seconds. If it is, something's up on their machine. Next.js is not able to compile. Next.js is very compute intensive. So a simple website like ours, app.hynrixdevs.com, which maybe like not a lot of people hit every day, like maybe 1,000 people. Concurrent users maybe like 30, 40. This also runs on a very expensive AWS box. I ran it on like a $30 machine, did not work. Right now it runs on a $200 machine. So Next.js is an expensive framework when it comes to compute. Generating this HTML on the server is very expensive when it comes to compute, which is why you might have a smaller machine, which is why you might be facing this issue. Eventually when you deploy it on a bigger machine and you're fine. Alright, we are at 8 p.m. Hopefully a few people had their dinner. Let me do a quick poll and then let's proceed to the next section. Are we good to go, guys? Now comes some more opinionated things which are going to be like, why are we doing things like this? Unfortunately, this is how Next does it. And that's what we have to do. And it's not bad. You get used to it eventually. Then eventually there's a writing code. Then another framework will come. You'll have some teething pains trying to understand that framework. And then eventually you'll be like, okay, this is how things are done here. All right. Layouts. There is one file that I missed. I told you what page.tsx does. We created our own folders. signin/page.tsx, signup/page.tsx. But this layout.tsx file I completely ignored. What is this layout file? Why do you need it? Let's look at that next. Again, there's a doc that gives you more detail on what this is if you want to read through it. What are layouts? Layouts let you wrap all your child pages inside some logic. So there are a few buzzwords here. Wrap and child pages. What does that mean? Let's look at the layout.tsx file. If you open the layout.tsx file locally, you'll see this is how it looks. It has some imports on the top. It has something called inter, God knows what that is. Some metadata, and then it exports a root, a component called root layout. Again, the name does not matter, but it exports a component which has, these are all, if you don't understand this, these are React types. And this children is something important if you remember from a few weeks ago. What does this root layout return? It says HTML ke andar, inside HTML, I'm going to have a body tag inside which I will render all the children. Very complicated. Too many things here, a lot of syntax. Let's try to understand it a little bit. Then let's write some code and try to figure out what this does. Let me officially state what these things do. I hope you understand what import./global.css does. It imports all the styles. What does this do? It creates a metadata object, more specifically exports a metadata object, and then Next.js knows that whatever metadata is coming from here, I need to put somewhere. For example, this create next app that you see here in the title, it comes from this title. If you change the title, this thing changes as well. So this is just the metadata of your page that you're exporting from the root layout.tsx. I repeat, the root layout.tsx. Hakirat, do you mean you can create layouts inside these folders as well? Yes, but we'll get there. Right now we have a single root layout.tsx, and this file imports the CSS, imports a bunch of other things. This is just a type. This is a font that it imports from next/font/Google. So this is where these guys export a bunch of fonts. You can get those fonts into your project by importing it from here. Exports the metadata, initializes the font, and then most importantly, exports a component by default, which returns first an HTML tag, then a body tag with class name equal to inter.className, which basically means whatever object we created here, it has a .className attribute, which probably brings all the styles for this font. So body className equal to inter.className wraps all the children with this font. That's why you need that's why this is done here. Can I remove this? You can if you don't need that specific font. This is a very nice font, which is probably something you need, so don't remove it. But you can totally remove this. HTML you need, body you need to wrap your whole project inside HTML and body. And then we say render all the children. This part seems a little weird. How does children come here? What exactly is children that is being accepted as an argument? And why are we rendering it here? Great question. To understand this better, let's write some code. Let's structure this project a little bit better. Let's write hi there right above children. So in layout.tsx, right above where children are rendered, put hi there and save your project. And then go to any route. I'm going to give you guys 10 seconds. What have I done? In the root level layout.tsx, I added hi there as text at the top and saved the file. That's all I did. Okay, take 10 seconds, write this code, take a breather. What are we doing? We're trying to explore the layout.tsx file in the root folder, trying to understand what it does. Can you already guess if you already tried this locally? When I put a hi there over here, I now see it at the top of every page. If I go to the root page, I see hi there at the top. If I go to the /signup page, I see hi there at the top. If I go to the /signin page, I see hi there at the top. So here, does it mean that this file is creating a layout for all the pages? Yes. This file is like, by every page that you render, be it this page or this page or this page, wrap that page inside this. First render HTML, then render body, then put hi there, then the children should be rendered. Irrespective of what page is being rendered, Next.js makes sure that bhai pehle hi there will render, then everything else will render. This creates a layout for all the pages that exist after this, be it this global page, be it this sign in page, be it this sign up page. That is what layout.tsx does. It creates a layout for this page and all the other pages. Why do we do this? We'll see this very soon. But do we understand the layout file? The root layout.tsx file. (87%, 88%). Okay. So people who don't understand, write some more code with me. Let's say I ask you, okay, bhai, I want you to create this. I want you to create a top bar for all the pages. If you go to the blogging website from yesterday, if you go to the /blogs page, you would see a top bar. If I actually open a blog as well, you will see a top bar. This is a very common pattern. You will see a top bar that's always present on websites. If I ask you to create the same top bar, can you create one? If in my root level layout.tsx, rather than writing hi there, if I add a div over here, can I create a top bar for every page of mine? Probably can. If I create a div and say this is going to be an empty div, but it will have padding of 4 all around, and it will not an empty div, give it a title, medium website, padding of 4, and a bottom border. Border dash b does what? It gives a bottom border to your div. If I write this much code, it will apply a nav bar, an app bar to every page of mine. This layout.tsx will be like, bhai, this page or this page. First I will render this, then I will render the actual contents of the page. So if I save this and go back here, you will notice I have a very clean app bar at the top. If I go to the root page, I see the app bar as well. If I go to the sign in page / sign up page, wherever you go, you will see the app bar. So this is why having a layout is cool. I did not have to rewrite this app bar in 3 different pages. I can also do the ugly thing and go to page.tsx and then paste this here and then paste this in 2 other places. But since this thing is going to be present in every page, you can paste it in the layout. You can say every page, this is your layout. This is the layout of your page. You will have HTML inside a body, inside a div, and then your actual component will get rendered. That's how sign up and sign in, and every page gets this. Do we understand this now? Okay, great. So we understand app bars. We understand layouts. Next up, I'm going to ask you to do one more thing. I'm going to say, what if you want all the routes that start with /signin to have a banner that says login now and get 20% off. I repeat, right now we only have a sign-in /page.tsx. In the future, we might have a sign-in /admin /page.tsx. There could be multiple pages that start with sign-in. If I tell you all these pages need to have a banner that says login now to get 20%. You'll see banners very popularly, right? If I go to Binance, I probably see a banner at the top. Okay, 20% off for the next 3 days if you sign up right now. Binance is banned now. You get the idea. Now I want, along with this top bar, we have a small banner below this, but only for the pages that start with /signin. So if the /signin page, and in the future if we add more pages like /signin /admin, they should also have a nav bar below or a banner below. How can you add that? Harkirat, what I will do is I'll go to signin page.tsx and I will write code here at the top. Okay, add a banner over here. You can add that, but what am I saying? I'm saying every page that starts with signin needs to have it. So what can you do? You can introduce another layout.tsx file for all the pages that start with /signin. This is the global layout.tsx. This is the layout.tsx for all pages that start with /signin. So if I, in this signin folder, create layout.tsx and here export default function return div that says 20% off for the next 3 days, and then give it a border bottom and text center, align the center text in the center. If I write this much code, then every page that starts with /signin has this banner at the top. Very common use case you'll see from time to time, like add a banner to the website. Write this code and then we'll see if it actually works. Probably should. So take 15 seconds, create a signin /layout.tsx file. Inside this layout, export a function by default that returns a div. And then open the /signin route and make sure you see the other banner. Open the other routes as well and make sure you don't see it there. 5 more seconds and then I'll try it myself. Alright. If I go to /signin, I see the banner. Where did all the code go though? I messed something up. I don't know if you guys see this. So this is what I see locally right now. I see the banner. I don't see all the contents. I don't see my sign in page anymore. I'm sure some of you already know the answer. Let me try to figure this out myself, and then I'll ask in chat. So if I remove layout. Oh, I know what it is. Do you know what it is the question. Okay, let me command Z. This is how you know I don't create layouts at all. If you go to any code base of mine, I don't create layouts. But okay, what did I miss? Can you guess? Let me rewrite the code. Export default function return div which has a div with the class name border bottom and padding 4, maybe padding 1, and it says 20% off for the next few days. What did I miss? I forgot to get the children as props and then render the children afterwards. It was like, acha, you want to render this layout? Cool. I never told it to render the actual component after it as well, which is why you saw the error. You have to give it a type, React. There you go. This was the thing that you actually have to write. You have to render the actual children as well, which is something I missed. Now if I save the file and run it, it should work, but would urge you to try it yourself on your machine and fix this. If you want to just copy it, you can also copy from layout.tsx and then basically copy this function and then remove this and just render the children and an app bar above it. If you don't want to figure out this react.react node type. This is the final code. This should probably work. I'll open this in a second, but take 30 seconds to write this and then we'll proceed. Oh, that was close. That would have taken a long time for me to debug, if I'm being honest. Maybe not long, but this happened. I'm proud of myself for debugging it that quickly, because you don't usually create layouts. You just have the root layout, but it's good to know for use cases like these, banners that are restricted to a specific page. Cool. So maybe 10 more seconds and then we'll proceed. I think it should work now. So what did I do? I created layout.tsx and sign in. And now every page that I create inside also /sign-in/admin/sign-in/worker, all of them will have a banner on top. This page will not, and the root page will not, because I've created the layout inside the sign-in folder. Hopefully that's clear. Now if I save this and try to refresh, you will see I see the banner here. If I go to the root page, I don't see the banner. If I go to /signup, I don't see the banner. On the sign-in page, I do see the banner. It's not centrally aligned, so let me quickly do that. Text-center, and now I see it centrally aligned as well. Are we good to go? Do we understand how layouts work, how you can put layouts in multiple folders as well? %. Good, not great. Good, not great, but I will proceed. So if you don't understand this, then you can come back to layouts and layouts in subroutes later, slide 9 and slide 10. Let's move to slide 11 because we don't need layouts anymore. As I said, I don't use them often or at all. So you can come back to it, understand it later on. Feel free to forget about layouts for the next rest of the class. Let's understand a little bit. Well, this will use layouts as well, but let me write this code. For the people who already understand it, try to solve it yourself. For the people who don't understand it, solve it with me. What does it say? It says, what if I want you to put that banner on both the sign up page and the sign in page? Now I want this banner that you created comes not just on the sign in page, but also on the sign up page. It should not come on the root page though. I repeat, it should not come on the root page. It should come on the sign up page. It should come on the sign in page. How would you change your code to make sure this comes on sign up and sign in and not on root? Assignment. Maybe take 30 seconds to think of it yourself and then look at these solutions. But there are two approaches I've already mentioned. Then we'll go through these approaches very soon. But maybe take some time and try to figure it out yourself. How would you build this if I asked you to? 15 more seconds, then we'll proceed. Alright. So what is the problem statement? You want the banner both on the sign up page and the sign in page. What did we do until now? We added sign in / layout.tsx, which means this banner exists on the sign in page, does not exist on the sign up page. Harkirat, I can just copy the layout, paste it here. No, then you have code repetition. You have same code in two different places. Harkirat, I can put this into a separate component and then have two different layout files. You could do that. You could, extract this into a component and then layout.tsx here, layout.tsx here. Both of them use the component. That is a decent approach. But the better approach is, why not put all the authentication routes inside a auth folder? So in your app folder, create another folder called auth and move sign into the auth folder. It will ask you update imports for sign in. Select yes. And move sign up also to the auth folder. Make sure you're copying it correctly because it's very VS Code makes it a little hard. So make sure you copy it correctly. app/auth/sign in, app/auth/sign up. This should be your final folder structure. Take 15 seconds. Make sure you're copying it in the right place, else you will face issues. But yeah. Move the sign in page and sign up page here. And now, we'll see what happens, but first, for now, do this. Take 10 more seconds. I hope you can get an intuition of for why I did this, right? Because we want some specific layout for both of these pages. So it might be good to, have them under a single folder. Alright, make sure the folder structure now looks like this. You have an app folder, inside which you have an auth folder, inside which you have the sign in and sign up folder. Both of them have pages. Sign in has layout as well right now. We'll see how that changes. But this should be your final folder structure. Look at this file folder structure on the left. For the people who have done it, try to explore it in the browser. Try to go to /auth/sign in and make sure you see the right things. I'm going to do the same in 5 more seconds. Make sure your folder structure is right. Alright. If I go to /sign in now, it says page is not found. If I go to /auth/sign in, I see the sign in page. I also see the banner. If I go to /auth/sign up, I see the sign up page. I do not see the banner. At least my routing works. I understand routing now. If I open this on the left and open Visual Studio Code on the right, since I have auth/sign-in/page.tsx, I have to go to auth/sign in and not sign in anymore. And similarly, auth/sign up. The problem is this banner only comes on the second page. How can we fix that? Can you guess? I can just move this layout over here. I can be like, the layout is going to be present in auth so that both of these folders have this specific banner. Anything that's inside auth now, anything that starts with /auth will have this layout, which has this specific div inside which it wraps the children. Now if I go to /sign up, I see the banner. If I go to /sign in, I see the banner. Hopefully that's clear. The first approach of having this banner in both the sign in page and the sign up page. What did I do? I created a top level auth page inside which I put the layout.tsx, and now I have a sign in and a sign up folder which have the respective pages. Do we understand this? Are we good to go? Try it out locally, take a breather. Let's see how difficult this was. Pretty good, 91%. 91 is great. Cool. In that case, I think we can proceed. If you're facing issues still, I would urge you to come back to the video later on. This was the first approach. What is the problem in this approach? The pages look like this. What if I give you this constraint? Okay, bhai, this should be /sign up, this should be /sign in, and both should have the same layout. How would you do it then? Right now, you hacked the system a bit. You created the top level auth folder, and here you put the layout. What's the problem that came with it? Your routes changed. What if I enforce the route needs to be /signup /signin? How would you do it then? The answer is here. When you're creating your folder, if you create it like this, then this path is ignored by Next.js. I repeat, whenever you're creating your folder structure, if you put a specific folder inside brackets like this, then Next.js will ignore this folder in the routes. You can still have a layout that will be applied to both sign up and sign in, but this will be ignored by the routes, which is why now if I go to /signin, sign up, I see the banner, I see the page. If I go to /signin, I see the banner, I see the page. Are we good to go? Is this straightforward? Just replace the folder with braces whenever you do. And this is the classic example of why you need that, right? You need a layout that needs to be applied to both of them, but you don't need this specific thing to come in the route. So just put it inside round braces, and then this will be ignored by Next.js in the routes. Do we understand this? This is straightforward. %. It's decent, not great, but I will have to proceed. I think. Happy to take doubts at this best. That's the best thing I can say. Happy to take doubts. 10% is like 60, 70 people, so I can take the doubts. If you have any doubts, store them till the end, and ignore layouts for now if you're having doubts. Let's build a bunch of more things and understand a few more concepts that are purely disjoint from layouts. So if you don't understand them, it's fine. The components directory. Generally, you should put all of your components, all of your sign-in component, sign-up component, blog component in a components folder and use them in the app routes rather than shoving everything in the route handler. Right now, what have we done? We have shoved everything in here. All the HTML is present here. And this works. You can do this, but generally you want to structure your components better. You want to create a top level folder called components and put your real components here. Here, can I call it something else? You can. You can call it whatever you want. You can call it utils. You can call it, I don't know, can't think of a better name, but you can name this whatever you want. Just make sure whatever name you are putting here, that name is present in tailwind.config.ts over here. Tailwind needs to know where you are writing your React code, and hence whatever folder you are creating, we are creating components. It's already present here by default. If you create something else, make sure you add an entry over here in tailwind.config.ts. In this folder, we should write our components. So let me write a signin.tsx component, which will actually contain my component code, and the route handler. If I go to pages/signin.tsx, this should be as simple as div followed by a sign-in component that it imports from somewhere. It shouldn't have all of this logic. This should be in another folder, in another UI folder, components folder, so that you have better routing is separate from your actual component logic. So what have I done? I've created a top level components folder. I introduced a signin.tsx. Here I can export as a constant as well. So export const signin component. You can call it signin component. You can call it signin as well. It might create some issues for you, which is why I'm calling it signin component. And return, all the logic that was present in that file. What am I doing? I'm just moving all the component logic from this page, so this and this, over to a different folder. Take your time, do it, no rush. And then importing this sign up component here. So just cleaning up my logic, nothing else, just adding some more structure to the project. Hopefully that's pretty straightforward. So take your time, take a minute and do it. What did I do? Copy over all the component logic from this route handler, from signin/page.tsx over to components/signin.tsx. This file right here. It gives me a red squiggly. Needs a type. Why does it need a type? Oh, sorry, my bad. That syntax was incorrect. There you go. That's the right syntax. Export const this thing equal to function, or if you want to keep things simple, you can do this as well. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter how you export it or define it. The key idea is to move all your component logic to a different folder or a different file more specifically. So your route handle is clean, and we'll see other benefits of it later on. Cool. Take 30 more seconds to do it. Just copy pasting code from one place to another. A few questions you might have it, Harkirat, why are we not exporting by default? You can totally export by default. If you're exporting by default, you have to import it like this. If you're exporting as a constant, like this, export function sign up component or sign in component, then you have to import it like this. Harkirat, why did you name it sign in component? Why did you not name it just sign in? You can name it sign in. If you name it sign in, you have to import it as sign in, and this function is also called sign in. So then you can either remove this function, or you can be like sign in as sign in component. So just to not have conflicts with this name, I renamed this to sign in component. This can also be sign in. If you have this as sign in, make sure you're importing it as a different variable, because this default function also has a sign in name. Alright, so import export the way you want. Take 15 more seconds and then we proceed. Also make sure this actually works. So once you do this, make sure you're able to go to the sign in page and it still works as expected, right? Hoping that's straightforward, but I'll still do a poll. It's just moving files around and nothing too extra. The only key thing to learn here is you have a top level components folder where you have all your components. And if you want to rename it to something else, make sure that thing is present in Tailwind as well. %. I will take a pause. 83%. Is it just time, or is it some specific issue? Just let me know in chat. Is it just time? Just need more time? Time, alright. Take your time, it's fine. So 3 more minutes, guys. Let me answer some questions. We don't have a lot of slides left. Let me quickly share what's left. 12. Yeah, there's not a lot left. One important thing that's left is client and server components. So stick through this if you're, if you think the class is going slow. Maybe just wait for 20 more minutes and then you can feel free to drop off. But yeah, something important is coming. Alright, 90% is decent, but 91 is great. Function was not mentioned in auth/layout.tsxy. Oh. Let's go to auth/layout.tsx. You are saying export default function was mentioned here. What are you saying? Sorry, are you saying something else? Can you repeat the question? Explain again. What if you create 2page.tsx in a folder? Then which one will you explain? How can you create 2page.tsx in a folder? How can you create 2 files in the same folder? You cannot have, if I go new file page.tsx, it doesn't let me. A single folder in the Windows or Linux or Mac file system cannot have 2 different files. So, and what's the other question? Someone asked a good question. Explain again. So the only thing that I did in this slide was, rather than having all of my HTML over here, for example, sign up page, I said don't have it here, have it in a separate folder only called components. Inside this components folder, put all of your logic here. Hi there. Harkirat, what is all of this TypeScript? I don't know. Something I created in yesterday's blog class. If this feels a little more complicated, you can remove this and have a simple sign up page, sign in page, input box, type equal to text. If you don't want all the styles, that's fine. You can have a simple sign in page like this as well. The key thing to do is extract all the component logic separately and then import it here in your sign in/page.tsx. If I refresh, as you can see, I see a simple sign in page. I don't see input boxes. I don't know why. Something obvious I'm missing. Input placeholder equal to user name. There you go. I see an input box and then placeholder. You can create an ugly page as well. You don't need the fanciest page. The key thing is to have some code here. Have a button here. This button is very important. So if you're creating this component on your own, make sure you have a button over here that says submit or whatever. Alright. So you can create it yourself. I just copied over all the logic from there, which is why I have a fancier sign-in page. Alright. 3 minutes have passed. Let me do the poll one more time. Are we good to go, guys? Something important is coming, server and client components, and then we're good to go. I'm glad we're able to sort of complete this class. Very good. I thought we'll not be able to, but okay, great. So 93%, let's proceed. 90% is great, just like someone said in chat. All right. Now, let's do one more thing. If you look at the button over here, right? The button in signin.tsx. Yeah, there you go. This button right here. There's a lot of noise above and below, so let me make it like easily viewable. If you look at this button right here, it doesn't have an on-click handler right now. Ideally, something should happen when you click on it. So add an on-click equal to, either define a function here or define it separately, doesn't matter. But try to log something like this, console.log. Hi there. You can do this. This is one way to add a on-click handler, or you can define it separately over here, function handler, and then use this handler over here, doesn't matter. Either way, on the button add a handler. We did not have a handler right now. We did not have a on-click listener. Let's add that on-click listener and put hi there over here. Take 15 more seconds, do it, and then let's see what happens. Hercules, why did you not have it already? This seems very simple. It does feel very simple, but it will give us troubles. We'll see what those troubles are, what are client and server components very soon. Alright, what did I do? In my signin.tsx, the button that I had, or if you created your own, the button that you had, add an on-click handler here. Common questions that come is, why are we not calling it here? And that's because you don't call functions in React. Whenever you're adding an on-click handler, you just give the signature of the function. You don't have to actually call it. Here is the signature of my function. Here is where I've defined it. Here is where I'm using it. If I save this, and if I go back to the website, you will see an error that says event handlers cannot be passed to the client component props. If you need interactivity, consider converting part of this to client component. It is giving us a hint, but generally it's giving us a very big error. A single line of code changing, just me adding an on-click handler here. If I remove it, everything is fine. If I add it back, everything goes bonkers. Why? Something changed here. Something is present in this on-click handler that is making Next.js very angry. What is that thing? Let's look at it in the next slide. So what have we done in this slide? I just added an on-click handler to the button, and then Next.js started to give us a very big error. Let's see why is it giving this error. What does it expect us to do to fix this error? Client and server components. This is a very important concept in Next.js. Today even React has server components, but Next.js, very importantly, you need to know what these things are. So last set of slides, so please pay attention. Very nice reference here if you want to go through it yourself, official docs, but let me explain in my own terms. Next.js expects you to identify all your components as either client or server. Identify means whenever you're creating a component, whenever you are writing, this logic in a signin.tsx file, or even if in your route handler page.tsx, this component that you have created, Next.js says, bhai, there are two types of components, either a client component or a server component. And you have to tell me what each and every component is. Next.js expects you to identify or describe or tell, is this a client component, is this a server component? We'll see what those are very soon. As the name suggests, server components are rendered on the server. Server components are put on the HTML on the server itself, what Next.js is supposed to do. But client components are pushed to the client to be rendered. If you create a server component, it means you want it to be rendered on the server. If you create a client component, you're like, this probably has something which doesn't make sense on the server, and hence I will push it to the client. If you look at it, when did we get troubles? We got troubles when we created a on-click handler. Why? Because you cannot really click anything on a server. There's no concept of clicking a button on a server, which is why Next.js began to complain and told you, okay, by you have something that doesn't make sense to render on a server, so probably make signin a client component. What is the downside of making signin a client component? Why can't we make everything a client component? Then you lose all of your SEO capabilities. So if you need SEO, the thing needs to be a server component. If you need client side things, if you need an on-click handler, then you need a client side component. Okay, that seems a little confusing. Yes, it does. We'll see very soon how you can optimize your app so that it both has SEO and has on-click handlers. But what is the ugly thing we need to do for now? We need to tell Next.js, okay, bhai, this thing has something that doesn't make sense on a server, an on-click handler, and hence please convert this into a client component. We need to explicitly tell this to Next.js. Harkirat, why did we not have to explicitly tell it is a server component? Because every component by default is a server component. If you feel something needs to be a client component, you need to explicitly tell that to Next.js. How do you do that? By writing use client at the top of the file. Harkirat, this looks very ugly. Yes, it does. This has a lot of debate on Twitter. Okay, this is how we write React today, but unfortunately it is. This is how you have to describe, okay, this component is a client component. Harkirat, write use client. This ugly string at the top of your file. Yes, this is how you have to tell Next.js that this is a client component. And you don't have to do it in every file, but the files that have an on-click handler or other things, we'll see what those other things are. You have to describe them as client-side components, and then write this at the top of the file. Cool. Now, if you go to the page, you should be fine. So things work now. If I remove use client from here, Harkirat, things break. If I add use client here, things work. So you will also see this very popularly in, if you want to go through the CMS page, like the website app.analyticsservice.com. If you go through the code of that, you'll see I have use client in a bunch of pages. All the pages that use state need to be use client. This state needs to be present on the client, right? Use effect, if you want to use, needs to be a client. As you can see, like I have 20 different components in this as well, repository as well, that have explicitly been mentioned as client components. All right. Let's see how we are doing. Okay, but let me go through the slides a little bit more. Let me explain this a little bit more. By default, all components are server components. Let me recap what I've done first. What did I do? The only thing I did was, since I need to add an on-click handler here, I added use client at the top of the file. That's all the code change I made. And if I save this file and run it, it works. If I save this file, remove this and save this file, it breaks. If I add this back, it works. So this is how you can identify a component as a client component. And by default, everything is a server component. Why did I have to make it a client component? Because I have a on-click handler here, which needs to run on a client. Doesn't make any sense to run on a server. All right. If you want to mark a component as a client, you need to add the following line to the top of the component. Very ugly, but unfortunately how things are done. When should you create a client component, Harkirat? Whenever you get the error that tells you that you need to create a client component. So if you want to, if you want a rule of thumb as to when you should create a client component, React will complain very bad, scream at you, and you can understand, this component I need to change into client component. Or generally, whenever you're doing something that needs to be done only on the client, for example, use state. When you're creating state, this state needs to be stored on the client, right? There's no point of storing it on the server. Then you should defer that to the client. On-click handler, whenever your button cannot be clicked on the server. So all these components that use these hooks or use on-click, or generally Next will scream at you, okay, please, you've added something here that needs to be run on the client, and then you convert it into a client component. Rule of thumb is to defer the client as much as possible. Rule of thumb is, okay, bhai, if this guy needs an on-click handler, so chalo, you convert this into a client module. You shouldn't convert everything to a client module. Then it takes away, the benefits of server-side renting, takes away the benefits of React of Next. So you should not just be like top-level component client, and then everything else below it will also become client. You should be like whatever, as far as I can go, I will go, and then eventually last thing I'll convert into a client component. Assignment. Try updating this to mark it as a client component. We've done that. You will notice that the error goes away. Some nice readings. So if you want to go, so eventually when you create applications, you'll create a client-side component, and then you might want another server-side component to be a children of a client-side component. Next.js doesn't support this, so I reached this specific issue when I was creating this website, app.analyticsservice.com, and I realized this is very hard to do. Server has a client, has a server has a client. So this issue explains how you can do it in case you want to see it, but you don't need it just yet. It's a nice read though. Cool. How are we doing? Do we understand? Okay, there is something called a client component. There is something called a server component. Both are a little different. And whenever you want to do client-side stuff, you add use client to the top of the file. Alrighty. Great. Cool. Okay, let me share one more thing you might want to do. You might have this thought in your head, Harkirat, ke the sign in page is no longer SEO optimized, Harkirat. The sign in and sign up are suddenly became client side components. So how will SEO know, you have, this is a sign in page? Great question. For things like these, you should do this. You should create another component here called button.tsx, inside which you export const button equal to function, or let's keep things in export function button, which actually renders your button, so that only your button is rendered client side. The thing that needs to make this a client component, this very small button, which doesn't matter, doesn't need to be SEO optimized, can run on the client, but your main code, your sign in, username, password, these remain SEO optimized, they still run on the server. So you can do something like this, so that this is a client component. As I said, you defer the client as much as possible. You defer the component that needs to be client as much as possible, so that you get all the SEO properties on all of this content, which is why you can just extract that into a separate component and mark that component as a client component, and all the major chunk of your code can remain server side optimized. All right, good to go. This was pretty much the last thing for today. There's another slide after this that I'll defer to tomorrow because it's slightly backend heavy. We don't have enough time to do it. Tomorrow we'll be doing backend and next. Speed seems pretty good, better than I was hoping for. Great. So 96%. Fucking A. I think this is the first class, and considering this is such sort of an advanced class, 91% is great, or whatever the word, I don't know, 90%. I will open for questions now. There's another slide after this if you want to go through it, but we'll go through this tomorrow, and then we'll do some backend stuff tomorrow as well. It's a great class. By great, I mean great for me. Not a lot of people dropped off, and percentages were good as well. Let me open for chat. Let's do some, since we have more time, let's do 15 minutes and more of. First, let's do technical questions. If you understand everything, feel free to drop off, or if you have any questions, feel free to stick back. That's all we had for today. I'm opening it up for doubts and questions, and whoa, the chat is heavy today. Let's begin from the top, maybe from the bottom. Client, okay, so also feel free to drop off. As I said, if you know everything, if you understand everything, no need to stick around. If you want to keep in the background, feel free to. Client-side rendering can be made SEO optimized using meta tag index.html. Then why SSR? Client-side rendering can be made, I'm going to give you a bombastic side eye. Client-side rendering can be made SEO optimized by using meta tags in index.html. Yes, sir. You can add a meta tag. So this person is saying, why do you want to do this for SEO? Go to wherever your index.html file is, add a bunch of meta tags there. And then you'll be like, what are meta tags? Basically what the first thing that Google looks for or a bot looks for. Okay, what is the metadata of your application? You can add as much metadata as you want. But, your metadata can only have 10 things, 20 things. You'll put we are a blogging website. Your real web, for example, daily code has, so many tracks. It has a custom hooks track, TypeScript track, code along track, whatever. All of these Google needs to, I want Google to know everything. So either I'm doing this, anytime I add a blog post here, I add another meta tag called custom hooks, or I make my website server side rendered, or the HTML returns this. How many meta tags will you add? How much will you tell? As your application grows, all of this code is being stored in the backend. This code along track, this SQL track is stored on a backend somewhere. How will you take all that backend code and put it in the meta tag in your index.html file, right? So you can have meta tags. They're only 1% of what SEO looks for. It's looking at your website. So there are 10 different things you need to optimize. What is the .next folder? What is the .next folder? It is the folder that has your final code. So it's a good question. If you remember, in React, when we used to do npm run build, it would create what? It would create a dist folder for us. Similarly, if you run npm run dev, or eventually when you start your application, this next folder has your actual server side code. This is your actual JavaScript code that is running the server, rendering your components, all that jazz. So this is similar to the dist folder in React. Only in React you have HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. This has a server. This has 10 different things. That's what the .next folder is. Please quickly explain how do we add component folder and remove the layout.tsx. How do we add a component folder We did not remove layout.tsx. I never removed layout.tsx. I simply added a component folder. I added a sign-in route inside, sorry, a sign-in component inside. I went to app/auth/whatever, sign in or sign up. And here I rendered this component rather than writing all of my code here. That's the only thing. I did not remove layout. Layout is still here. Maybe re-ask your question if your question is something else. Let's see. Repeat from the error will occur. We've put the on-click handler. I don't understand. Okay, good question. This will happen many times in your Next.js code writing journey. If I ask you to create a project today, you have enough constructs to at least create a front-end project. When you are creating a front-end project, what will happen is you're writing code and then suddenly Next.js begins to scream at you. It tells you something like this. Okay, event handlers cannot be passed on a client component. Some error it will give you like this, and it will give you a warning that says, if you need interactivity, consider converting this part to a client component. It is clearly telling you that wherever you have written this code, which you can search through your project and reach that code, it's saying this needs to be a client component. You are adding interactivity here. You are adding an on-click handler. This cannot run on the server, so please convert this to a client component, which basically means it is asking you to put this string at the top telling Next.js this is a client component. Now if you refresh, the error goes away. So what is the TLDR of the learning? Okay, when you see these errors, put use client at the top. What is the real learning here? Okay, this becomes a client component, gets rendered on the client, and hence you need to, whenever it throws screens at you like this, you need to convert that specific component to a client component. Only static data can be used inside server component. Dynamic things. Add dynamic things should be done on client component. Not exactly. If you go, tomorrow we'll convert this into a blogging website which has a backend and everything. So tomorrow we'll create like a /blog/1/blog/ something like this. And here as you can see the routes are dynamic. And a lot of these routes will be rendered on the server. So it's not necessary if you have dynamic data, you need to do it on the client. We start from the top here. There you go. We converted sign-in component as client component, but the network tab, I still see it renders the first render. Let's see. That's a good point. Let me convert sign-in to be. This might totally happen. Okay, it still renders it on the server. Client component might not necessarily mean it only renders on the client, but let's see. Local 3000. That is a good point. If that is true, I don't know yet. Sign in, inspect, network, refresh. If I go to the sign in page, do I see sign in here? I do see sign in here, as you can see. Do I see username here? I do see username here. Harkirat, I converted this to be a client component. I still see them here. Yes. Let's see why. Even I don't know. I think my guess here, I've read this once. Okay, if you create a client component, it gets rendered both the places on the server and the client also. But let's Google. Client side component still renders on server next. Components in client component module graph are primarily rendered on the client, but with Next.js, they can also be pre-rendered on the server and hydrated on the client. The use client directive must be defined at the top of the file. Someone asked the same question. Client side component rendering on the client or the server side. I'm confused by the docs how describe component. Its state client components are pre-rendered on the server and hydrated on the client, but it also says that components are in the client component module graph are primarily rendered on the client. My question is that what context client components will be rendered? Good question. Client components are rendered during any form of server side rendering, not just during pre-rendering. So basically they are rendered on the server. This document is pretty good on eliminating any doubts. Let's see. Why do client components get SSR'd to HTML? This is exactly your question. So like this is a good place to look at the answer. I can read through it if you want. Oh wow, someone. If you're familiar with React, not change the mental model, but it adds a new layer before the registration code runs. ISC server layer might be remind you of remix loaders. This is why client components get SSR into the HTML. So they have a reason here. It's, looks a little too complicated to me. Happy to dive deep into it if you want. The RSC, but yes, they do get rendered on the server is what they say and what happens. Good point and good call out. Probably it deserves a bounty because I said they don't get rendered on the server. So $50 to you, sir. Getting a hydration error, any idea on it? Can you paste the error in a Notion doc and send the Notion doc? If we wanted to customize the function parameters like we did in React, like this, now how do we do it on the server side? If we want to customize the function with parameters, so firstly, if you have an on-click handler, you cannot do it on the server side. You can only do it on the client. And to answer your question again, if you want to pass in parameters, you can still do it like this, 1, 2, 3, whatever. So I'm unsure if I understand your question. You can pass in parameters like this. Only this function is being called on the client with these specific arguments. By making the button as a different component, how does it access the state of the component username and password? I mean, you can pass it down over here. You can make it accept an on-click. Oh, will this work? I'd probably pass in, the username and password. I guess that's a good question. One way you can do it is, pass in the username and password from here. But I'm thinking, can I do this? I probably cannot do this, but let's see. Probably cannot do it. Maybe can do it. I don't know. But yeah, to answer your question, you can pass username and password as props. Why Next.js built on top of React? Why not top of Angular? Why React written in JavaScript? Why React not written in Java? Framework Next.js is a framework written on top of React. Similarly, someone else can create a framework on top of Angular. So this person saw an inefficiency in React and wanted to fix it. This person did not want to create their own framework. So that's the answer. If we want to use props, we can use server components. Yeah, you can pass props down the props in a server component. But yeah, if we somehow make this React crawler friendly, then what would the Vajood of Next be? Yeah, you can make React SEO friendly, by the way. There are a lot of libraries that came that you would just import that library in your React project, and then when you start your website, if a bot hits it, it would return it a different response. If a real human hits it, it would return it a different response. So there were a lot of attempts at doing this outside of Next as well, so that you can have SEO in your React application. But as I said, React gives you 10 different things. It gives you backend in the same place. It gives you routing, file-based routing. It gives you static site generation, something we haven't discussed. So that's right. There still has Vajood, server-side rendering has its other benefits as well. Waterfalling. Even if you add SEO optimized to React, you don't get rid of waterfalling. So yeah. Repeat the part from. Okay, answered that. Operation not permitted. Rename this to this. Seems like a Windows error. Seems like you're not able to rename. Oh, it seems like in Windows you cannot name the file to curly braces auth. Sorry, like round braces auth. Let's see. Windows can't name file to. Yeah, this is just I don't know. It's a Windows error. It seems like your file directory is not letting you, create that folder. You can not create that folder. It's fine. Don't have the auth over there. Or just figure out. I'm sure there's a way to do it. VS Code is letting me do it. Okay. See a question there. How do you prevent caching in Next.js during development? Sometimes it can be painful. How do you prevent caching in Next.js during development? I don't see any caching. What do you mean caching? It just works. It hot reloads. There is no caching during development unless you saw something specific. Let me know if you did. What is import aliases? Basically, when you're importing things at the top, you have aliases from where it is imported. If I search through @ as you can see here, rather than importing from // something, I have add the rate of as an alias to this, so that anytime @ something is written, That is the same as the root folder / something. That's what an import alias is. Client side, okay, answer that. What is the more preferred way to use Next.js for front end or back end or both? So most big repositories I'm saying there today use it for both. I did not love using it for both, which is why I'm thinking of migrating it to, the backend to someplace else. I personally did not love it. Doesn't mean the industry doesn't love it. Not more, like all the open source projects I open use Next for both front end and back end. Unfortunately, I don't personally love it. You said Next is expensive to the deployment. Then why are we using it? Why are companies using it? They don't care about the expenses. They care about SEO optimization. So that's the answer. Something expensive doesn't necessarily mean it's bad, right? Is Socket.io supported in front end and back end Next? No. Socket.io in Next backend is a bad idea. Front end you can, but don't have your WebSocket server in Next.js. Just don't. If you're creating a WebSocket server, first of all, it won't let you. It doesn't make it very. When we reach backend, you'll see this. It lets you create HTTP routes. It doesn't let you create WebSockets. So basically, you cannot do it. Even if you find a weird way to do it, don't do it. Next is meant for HTTP backend. It's not meant for WebSocket backend. So don't use it in the backend. Can you explain the water flow thing in React again? Sure. So the water flow thing in React was basically this. Okay, I said, if I go back to the slides, read about this, not just a React concept generally. Even so, this is a popular interview question. Why was GraphQL introduced? Same answer. To prevent waterfalling. What is waterfalling? When you ask the server for something, get back a response, and only when you get back the response can you ask for the next thing, is what waterfalling means. It's waterfalling one after the other after the other. When one thing comes, a waterfall happens, then another thing comes, then waterfall happens, so on and so forth. When you have to send a request that you can only send when another request is sent to before is when waterfalling happens. And in our case, it's happening because you first need to get index.html, inside which JavaScript is written, like this script tag is added. So you get the JavaScript file, then you run the JavaScript file, and then you figure out, I need to get the blogs, and then you get the blogs and render them. Ignore this /me endpoint. So 3 round trips you had to take to render the blogs. Versus in Next.js, you asked for the blogs, you get the blogs directly in the HTML. So that's the benefit. What if I want a banner to be above the header of the auth pages only? If banner to be above the header, I'm guessing, I'm assuming you mean this. You want this to be above Medium website, then you're screwed. Then you need to, you cannot have a root layout that has a Medium website. Then maybe there's a way to figure it out. Actually, I don't know. But if I had to guess, you can do this. This is a weird hack that I've seen being used. Something like this. If prop slot, you can basically get the current route here. If route dot starts with, if not route dot starts with /auth, only then render this, else don't render this. And you can get the route from, I'm sure there's an easy way to get the current route here. So yeah, this is how I've actually seen it happen in a place. So you can use this if you want. This is the hack that was done in a company of mine. But looks pretty ugly. So maybe there's a more standard way of doing this. Google it, you'll find it. Or like the worst case is, you don't have app bar here. You have app bar as a separate component that, you put in your layout.tsx, you put it whatever below here, and everywhere else you put it above. So that's how you can do it. All right. Good question. These are all like, you face this issue in production in one day and then you figure out hacks like these. All right. Okay. Recap layout.tsx. What is the analogy of layout.tsx in React? Unfortunately, there's no analogy. You can create layouts in React as well. You just have to create them yourself. There is no analogy. So there's no easy analogy of layouts here in React. The reason they are introduced, or like why you use them, is to add some code that wraps the rest of your components. For example, a good example here might be, let's see, if you go to linkedin.com. If I go to linkedin.com, you see a top bar that's present on most pages. Even if I go to the jobs page, I see this top bar. If I go to the my network page, I see this top bar. It's part of my layout. So if you don't want to rewrite the code of having this app bar in 10 different places, is when you wrap everything inside the app bar. You say by app bar on top and everything else will be inside. That's exactly what's happening in the celia.tsx. Okay, you know, app bar on top, and then anything else gets rendered inside. And then it might happen that this had a bunch of tabs. You know, it has this network thingy on the left, and then there are a few pages here that you can go to which all render different things. So there you can have a separate layout which has just this part which is shared between multiple pages. That's the analogy of like the best way I can explain layouts. Alright, let me open chat one more time because there are too many questions. I missed a few. Alright, start from the top. Okay, sorry, bottom. Please check your sign-in component. Since you are using use client there mistakenly, there is a button component not throwing error. Please check your sign-in component. Since you are using use client there mistakenly, does button component is not throwing error. I'm not using use. I mean, I did remove it from there. Okay, I'm going to remove this. I did a few things. I removed them all. Okay, removing use client from here. Oh, sorry. Button made should be there. Sign in made should not be there. All right. Let's see now. I still don't see an error. The top bar changed, but like, I'm sorry. Could you? I don't understand the question. Can you repeat the question, Sujit? What about serverless deployment for Next.js on AWS Lambda? What about it? We haven't yet reached deployment, but yeah, you can. What about serverless deployment? You can deploy Next.js applications in a serverless fashion on Lambda, on maybe not on Lambda. I'm unsure about that. I know Next.js uses Lambda under code. I'm unsure if you can directly deploy Next.js application Lambda. I don't think you can do that. Could be wrong. You can deploy it on something like Amplify on AWS, and like most services that you look at, Vercel and Netlify deploy it in a serverless fashion on the edge. Try it and show your speed. Oh my god. Let me answer questions on the side. One more time we will start. We know the. Okay, 30-second break, guys. Okay, it's more exhausting than learning. Okay, not found 404. Where did you see the error? How do WebSockets on my whole frontend and Next.js microservice? Yeah, you have to create a separate service for WebSockets if you want to do socket or anything. Don't put it in your next code. Try this and okay, answer that. Page is rendering, but this error is in the console. There was an error while hydrating. Can you? Oh, you are doing something extra that I'm not doing in my code. Can you push your code to GitHub, put it in a Notion doc, and paste that next? Oh, I have used EJS backend templating Jalao. Okay, seems like you have something extra. Seems like you have EJS in your Next.js application, which I don't know why you have that, and I'm not surprised it's throwing an error. But show me your code. I don't know, but this is a very weird pattern. Basically, why do you have EJS in your Next.js application? No reason to have it. I don't know why you're trying it, but still, if you want to try it, paste the code. This probably is a use case no one has even tried. So I don't know if you'll find an answer to this on Google, but we'll see that. Can you use get static props and get server side props in app-based routing? कहाँ सुने हैं ये मैंने? These were originally present in Next.js, right? I don't think you use them anymore. I haven't seen them being used in Next 14. These were used in the Pages router not back in the day, like 6 months ago, before Next 13 was introduced. So, can you use them here? Do you need to use them here is the question. Now that you have this concept of server-side client-side. I mean, there might be a way to use them. You don't need to use them. Whatever they provided, you already have. So we'll see this tomorrow. But you can get props on the server. If you go through the slide, you'll see this, the last slide. You don't need them anymore. Although there might be, you might still be able to use them. You don't need them anymore in Next 13. If you go to the last slide, you'll see how you can get server.